27 member states of the Council of Europe have signed a document that urges a new framework for the European Convention of Human Rights, which will narrow the definition of inhuman and degrading treatment. The United Kingdom, Italy, the Netherlands, Denmark and Sweden are among the signatories. They also want deportations of asylum seekers to third countries for processing be authorised. Human rights groups warn the move would create a hierarchy of human rights. And for more on this, I can welcome Michelle Pace, Professor in Global Studies at the Department of Social Sciences and Business at Roskilde University in Denmark. Good morning, Michelle, and thank you for joining us. Not all European countries have signed this declaration, most notably France, Spain and Germany. So what chance does this initiative have of succeeding?
Well, we have some European member states who are still cherishing the values that we have, upheld for so many decades. We need to remember that the EU itself is founded on some core principles, not only of solidarity, but also to protect those who seek protection. So I believe that there will be some hard diplomatic juggling here, because the right to protection is also enshrined in the Convention of 1951.
Now, how significant is this move? Is it unprecedented on a European scale?
I would say it is unprecedented because, the situation in Denmark is quite a harsh regime. And Mette Frederiksen, the Prime Minister, has been shuttling across European countries for quite some time now, so this is not new, in order to sell its harsh regime. And I think we need to have a very fine balance here between EU values and the very values that the EU is founded upon, but also, this right to protection, which is enshrined in the Convention. So I believe that there will be, a series of discussions, I hope, but also human rights lawyers, because the very foundations upon which the EU stands is now being shattered.
Now, the European Court of Human Rights and, of course, the Convention as well do seem to be a favourite target of both governments and political parties who want to curb and cut migration. Why is this?
I think at the moment we have a very serious international struggle between the states' human obligations. So states are obliged to protect those who seek asylum if their life is in danger, against this kind of very heavily securitized discourse about focusing on border controls and protecting sovereignty. Now, of course, we need to have an organized and very clear system that ensures that states are, in fact, not violating their own obligations according to international norms, at the same time as, of course, the public in all European countries needs to be well informed. So I think we need to be very careful as well with the kind of rhetoric that is being used. So when, for example, we talk of illegal pathways, we need to make sure that there are legal pathways for people who really need protection. And these are, ways in which we can have an open discussion rather than a very harsh rhetoric that doesn't really deal with the facts. So we need to be very careful in terms of the language that is being used and question what is being politicized at the expense of state obligations when it comes to the rights of people seeking asylum.
Now, advocates for this, this move in the UK say that it does not intend to target genuine asylum seekers, but rather cases where for instance, dangerous offenders cannot be deported because of certain legal niceties in their home countries. What would you say to this?
Yes, we need to be careful which kind of model is being, followed here. In Denmark, for example, a petty crime, if someone with an immigrant background does not have the right lights on his bicycle, that is considered a crime. So we need to be, again, very careful about what kind of crimes we're talking about and which models we're following. Remember that the Danish model itself is modeled on another very harsh model, which is the Australian model, which is about externalization, which means giving responsibility to asylum processing to another third party and basically not obliging to those obligations. So again, we need to be super careful about what is being said, how it's being framed, and with what consequences, because there's a serious consequence in terms of the human rights of the people that have a genuine case of asylum, and we need to have robust systems that can distinguish between genuine cases of protection and needs for protection, and those, of course, who have the more flexible possibility to move, like EU members, citizens who can move from any EU country to another because they have the right to move.
Now, human rights groups say that it would create a hierarchy of human rights. If this move were to succeed, what would happen next? Could it possibly ultimately have an effect on the rights of nationals of European countries as well as migrants?
Yes, we are in a situation in Denmark where there's already, an established hierarchy of otherness. So, for example, when Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, we saw a very different response, both in Denmark but across the EU, to welcoming Ukrainian, people seeking safety in a third country. This was not the case for people who were fleeing from previously Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, and places where, were heavily hit by wars. We had also another case recently where Palestinian children from Gaza tried to seek medical treatment in Denmark, and Mette Frederiksen said, she used the argument that Palestinians are not integrated well in Danish society. So again, we need to be extremely careful between these politicized narratives that have to do with social cohesion and integration, when actually it is a very racialized policy that puts people in hierarchies of otherness. And I would say that in Denmark, even people who have a migrant heritage, who have been born here, have been educated here, are feeling very unwelcome and feel very unsafe, even though Denmark is the only country they know. So these kind of harsh rhetorics and policies have serious implications for people who are also European citizens in EU member states.
Now, the United Kingdom is one of the countries that has signed this document. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer made his name as a human rights lawyer, but now, as Prime Minister, he's trying to weaken a human rights convention. Is this indicative of how politics in Europe in general is going?
Yes, I think there is a very real danger that the very foundations upon which, the whole European Union is founded is being shattered from its core. And I think these conversations about the European Convention of Human Rights, the right to protection, need to encompass, international human rights lawyers, because we are at a serious danger point, and I think a turning point, where our own democracies are in danger of backsliding, because this is at the heart what a democratic state stands for. That is that the right to protection is for anyone whose life is in danger, and we need to protect that. And I think, these conversations need to be mindful that we don't just have these short-term political, rhetorical, practices at the expense of long, fought for and hard fought for rights established in the conventions. So I think we need to be extremely careful here.
Thank you very much for that. Michelle Pace, Professor in Global Studies at the University of Roskilde in Denmark.